Michael Boyle, StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 175 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle, StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days for just $1. And if you have a staff of 2 or more and you want to sign up as a group, we have a special membership offer for you, up to 50% off depending on how many people you got. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. If you want to get in touch with me, shoot me an email to StrengthCoachPodcast@gmail.com. All right, on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about the book Legacy, asked him some of his takeaways from the book. He's got his whole staff reading it. And a forum post called New Warm-Up Ideas. That and much more coming up on the Coach's Corner in a little while. Aaron McGurr from Perform Better joins us to talk about the current sale, some upcoming education, including the One Day, and the new Legend equipment line. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, Rachel Cosgrove is on to talk about balance in your life. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, I have physical therapist and strength coach Jonathan Fass. He's on to talk about pain science. Spoke to John about all the current research on pain associations, and the concept of nocebo. Coaching our clients to avoid pain. Can we make our clients worse? Is pain in our head? And so much more. Great discussion on pain coming up from Jonathan in a little while. On the Art of Coaching with Exos, Joel Sanders is on to talk about bourbon and barbells. Well, mostly he talks about the different characteristics of barbells. Good stuff from Joel. For the Functional Movement System segment, I have Frank Dolan on. He starts a new series on a review of all 7 screens of the FMS. Today he talks about the overhead squat. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. How are you?
All right, first of all, happy birthday, October 30th, or a couple days after, but hope you had a good one.
I did have a great birthday. It's the 31st. It's Halloween, and I always tell my kids that it's a national holiday. Everybody dresses up. People give out candy.
Oh, that's right, 31st.
There's a lot of celebrating as a result of my birthday. If you check back, Halloween started 56 years ago. So.
There you go. Nice. Yeah, I said the 30th. Sorry, 31st. Good stuff. All right, Coach, you know what? I wanted to talk. I saw somebody had posted that they had just read Legacy based on your suggestion. Tell us a little bit about Legacy and maybe a couple takeaways.
It's really funny because we just were talking about this in the staff meeting. I just ordered 20 copies not 15 minutes ago to give out to our staff. That's going to be our next reading. So Legacy, and it's also very appropriate because the All Blacks just won the World Rugby Championship again. So New Zealand won on Saturday. I did not see the game, but I believe they beat Australia. So for all our friends listening in Australia, my condolences. But Legacy is about the culture of the All Blacks in New Zealand, and it's one of those things that we don't know about. It's the number one seller, obviously, in rugby. I think it's one of the number one selling sports books in Europe, actually. But over here, because we don't have much of a rugby culture, we would basically ignore the book in total. And somebody, I can't think who initially told me I needed to read it, but I had recommended it at the BSMPG directors meeting. So it was Derek Hansen that had gotten it based on that and who had posted a picture and tweeted halfway through, really loving it. But the big takeaway is it's funny. And this is what we were talking about in the staff meeting when we were talking about staff development. One of the chapters, I believe chapters, is called No Dickhead. And basically the theory is that the subtitle is that better people make better All Blacks. And so their thing is that when they're trying to create this culture, when they're trying to create what is in fact the winningest sports franchise in the world in terms of percentage of games won, one of the things they realize is that we don't take bad people. If we get someone who comes in and they're a bad fit, so I don't believe that there would be an All Blacks in the NFL. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to get any players. But I think it's a big thing when you think about trying to develop teams, even in the American culture. I've always said that, and I said this at the directors meetings, I think sometimes you're going to end up with people maybe of questionable character in a professional sporting organization, really in any setting. If you kind of read the papers, you realize that, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, or ice hockey, or any of the major sports, there are going to be problems. I mean, we have a problem, women's soccer, you look at Hope Solo getting arrested multiple times, for drunken disorderly and assault and battery. So I don't think any team is immune. But my feeling is that even if it's not sort of a blanket no dickheads rule, I think there really has got to be a ratio. And if you can't kind of stay within that ratio, I think when you get beyond 10 or 20% problem children, they begin to take over your locker room or your clubhouse or whatever it is. And you have trouble. You have cultural issues. So this is really what the book is about culture. There's another chapter on what they call cleaning sheds. And, so you have to sort of read through some of the European references that you don't get, but cleaning the sheds really relates to the fact that the best players are actually active in the All Blacks in cleaning up after and cleaning up the locker room, and they make a point of, before they leave, making sure that everything's clean. And it's not like a lot of times over here you've got like, the rookies do this or the freshmen do this. And a big part of their culture is everybody does this. The best players do it. Everybody's picking up tape, and everybody's making sure that their stall is neat and tidy, and everybody's respectful of the equipment guys. They always talk about the kit, which is their the European expression for uniform. And it's there's all these little things that they emphasize, but what you realize is that little things are what create big things, and that's really what this book is about.
That's awesome. And I think we hear it a lot too, just like even like E-Myth, for example, talking about, establishing your systems because you want to hire for somebody's personality and for somebody's character and because you can train them. If you have your system, you could always train somebody to do whatever it is in your business. So we've heard it a lot. It's just an interesting.
Right. And that was the crux of what we talked about today in our meeting. I always talk about that CNP idea. What's the most important certification to get? Well, you should be a certified nice person. And the idea that I just got a compliment last night, and I get them all the time from people about how good our staff is. And I always tell them, her compliment was not about any exercise technique that we had shown her. Her compliment was about how comfortable somebody had made her feel on her first day, and how, as a result, she had brought 2 more friends. And you realize that, hey, we basically got 4 customers out of it, because she came initially to bring her daughter, and then after she had this experience with one of her, and actually ended up being an intern who just sort of engaged her when she came in and took away a little of her anxiety. Look, I'm in this big place, and it's like athletes, and, I've got all these things to worry about. And suddenly you go in another book that we read, Raving Fans. We've created that raving fan. We've created what we want, which is that long-term customer. And you listen to Alan. Alan always talk about the long-term value of a customer. What's the long-term value? And what you want is that long-term customer who's going to sign up, who's going to stay signed up, who's going to tell their friends how great the place is. And that comes from people. That doesn't really come from programming.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite people in the industry, seriously, are current or former MBSC people, Kevin Carr and Anna Taco and Marco and Brendan and Brendan Rarick and Jamie Rodriguez and Adrian Norris. I mean, Anthony Miranda. There's just like so many good people that have come through there that have been so successful, and there's a reason why. So good stuff.
Yeah, and we've been deliberate in terms of always trying to find. I always say to people, hire for personality first. I've said it at a million seminars. You can make people smarter. You can't make them nicer.
Yeah.
It's way easier to give somebody information, and that's why we work so hard. And it's not like it's a plug, but with like CFSC, with programming, with regressions, because I know if I have really good, sincere people who want to see people get better, and I give them that really good system, that we're going to be what we are. We're going to be really successful. And we just keep getting better and bigger, and business keeps improving. But you can never lose sight. That's what I try to get these guys to understand in meetings. You can't lose sight of, I know what makes us good, and it's not me. It's them.
Yeah.
And the only thing that maybe I do well is I'm good at selecting them. And then I'm good at figuring out how to help train them. But ultimately, our our success is exponentially based on, like you said, the Kevin Carrs and the Marco Sanchez's and all the way down the line, Christina and Anna, and there's all these people, and there's a whole other generation of them coming through that, Ken and Steve Bigelow and Nicole, all these people are going to do a fantastic job because they're really good people.
What's amazing to me too, not to keep harping on this though, is that I think what you've done as well is, I don't know how to say it, but like kind of kept their ego in check as well, because none of those kids have egos, and they could, because they're getting their name mentioned by you all the time, and you're praising them. They're at one of the top strength and conditioning facilities in the world, thriving, and basically their egos can be super inflated. I'm sure you've had a couple come through here and there, but in general, the majority, I mean, it's amazing to me that they haven't come out like, I'm the man here. So it's pretty cool.
And I hope, in all honesty, I do hope that some of that is by example, because I feel like I don't act that way. I don't act like I'm important. I don't act like I'm better than they are. And as a result, I don't expect them to act that way either. I don't expect them to think, hey, I actually had a nice email interchange with Eric Cressy, and we were talking about, asking how his kids were doing. And I said, make sure you spend time with your kids, because the reality is they don't give a shit if you're a good coach. It'll be a long time before they realize whether you were or whether you weren't, or who read your books or who read your articles or how many blog hits you got. And they're a pretty good barometer of kind of what kind of a job you're doing. And so I think that's hopefully the example that you can provide for these kids. It's like Albert Meal used to always say, be careful, the size of your funeral will depend on the weather. And the reality is that's true. I forget where it's in Never Eat Alone, in one of those books, but they basically said that, like if it rains, the size of your funeral will decline by 40% or something like that. So it's not about how great a guy you were. It's just about whether I'm going to get the umbrella out.
Nice. Coach, you posted in the forum about new warm-up ideas, and although the video is a little older, talk to us, I'm sure there's other things that you've been doing. Talk to us about, some of the things that you're looking at in your warm-up right now.
Well, I think the biggest thing with us is trying to make it more systematic, trying to make it less what I would call jack-in-the-boxy, so that you're not up and down and down and up. And I think it's interesting. Sometimes I look at the warm-up I wrote, and then I start trying to do it, and I think, that's a stupid way to do it. I need to do all the things where I'm lying on the ground first, even though that may not be the order that I wanted to go in. It makes sense to only get up once. And so that was kind of what we were trying to talk about in that particular warm-up, and the idea of putting people, getting them in rows, getting them in front of you, really basic kind of logistical things that you learn as a phys ed teacher very early on, and how you can use those things, particularly for us. As we get bigger, the management of group sizes becomes more and more of an issue. Some of our adult groups, unfortunately or fortunately, now can creep up into the high teens. And you really need to figure out, okay, how do I organize this? We have some kids groups that, again, will creep up into the high teens when we have teams come in. And to keep that organized, you think there's a reason why football has all these lines and all these intricate, this guy's got to be here and you've got to be 5 yards apart. And because you want it to look good. You want it to not look like a mess. And that's in a big part what we're working on. And then there's obviously the same idea of looking at, okay, how much equipment do we need? How many bands do we need? Looking at it from sort of that FMS basis of thought in terms of, all right, are we addressing each pattern? Have we addressed a leg raise pattern? Have we addressed a squatting pattern? Have we addressed a lunging pattern? So there's, I think there's multiple things going on when you watch that particular warm-up. But it was just another, I'm trying with the strength coach stuff too sometimes to look and think. Sometimes I forget to share things, to be perfectly honest, in terms of, we did that, or I did it quick, or I did it for something else, and then I don't remember to share it. And that was one of the things that a guy actually, the reason I put that up is a guy on Twitter was saying, I need a really good warm-up for my lift. And I thought, we filmed a warm-up video not too long ago. I wonder what we did with it. And then I went and looked at it. And then in order to get it to this guy, I had to go and basically put it up on Twitter or on YouTube. And then once I got it up on YouTube, I'm like, well, why didn't I put this on Strength Coach? And then I started thinking, okay, on Strength Coach, I need to go and make sure that I get this up on, on the site, on the forum, all that stuff. So it just was interesting how it kind of came about.
I think we already had it up a while. When you first put it out, you'd sent it. I think that was up as a video of the week a while back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Coach, there was somebody posted an article about eccentric training, 5 myths about eccentric training. Can you just kind of talk about your thoughts on eccentric training and some things that you want people
Wouldn't you rather do that? I think you blogged about that at some point, or something similar. So it was interesting because it was Carl Valley that wrote it, and I find Carl to be an interesting guy. I know Carl; he's actually a local guy. He's a Boston area guy whose experience is primarily in track and field, and he's actually a really good writer at times, and then at other times he can be sort of a kind of a meandering, cryptic sort of writer. So I felt like that was a little more of the meandering, cryptic type of thing. So I tried to summarize a little bit better what I thought he had wanted to say in that particular piece. And I just feel like eccentric training kind of really, if we want to make it simple, it breaks down into two things: fast eccentric, slow eccentric. Fast eccentric is really your landing skill stuff. You're sticking your box jump, you're sticking your landings, whatever it is you're doing. And then slow eccentric really is your stuff in the weight room where you're trying to have a longer eccentric contraction, basically try to create more time under tension by increasing that length of the eccentric contraction. And I felt like he didn't really make that clear enough in the article. So I did read through it. I always try to read through them first before I comment, because I hate to be that guy who starts commenting in the thread and then saying he didn't read the article. That always drives me insane when someone says, I didn't read that. I haven't read the thread. Someone will go to the end of the thread and comment, I didn't read any of the posts before. What are you talking? Why are you posting that? So, but I do think he has a point in terms of realizing that we've got to view eccentric training in a couple of different lights, not just simply in the light of lowering weights slowly. And I do think there is some mythology that goes with that. I didn't think he hit hard enough on the point, the whole idea of you can lower more weight than you can raise. I tried, and one of the things that we said today in staff meeting, I tried all this stuff. I can remember reading a Charles Poliquin article about eccentric training, and that was where it said, 110 to 120%. So like an idiot, I went and said, okay, this guy should, if he can bench 300, he should be able to lower 330. So we tried doing some eccentrics with 330, and we benched some guys to the bench pretty hard. I was like, no one can do this. This is really weird. Then Christian Thibodeau, and I think actually, now that I couldn't think of the name the other day, I think it's Theory and Application of Modern Strength and Power Methods is the actual title of the book, or something along that line. And he does a really good job in that book of talking about eccentric training and talking about different types of eccentric training. And because the reality is, when you start thinking about eccentric training, one of the things that he talked about was this idea of a yielding isometric. And in a sense, a yielding isometric is eccentric training, but basically what he said is that I'll give you a weight, you're going to try to hold it, but it's so heavy that you can't. And that you will perform this sort of forced eccentric, which he referred to as a yielding isometric, which is then different than thinking, hey, let's say I give you 90%, which you're supposed to be able to do. Let's say you can do 90 for free. And then I ask you to try to do 5 eccentric emphasis reps. So there are some differences there, and it's interesting. I also think he maybe underplayed the DOMS effect. I do think eccentric training will really make people sore, but it's an interesting concept because it's also not as easy to do as everybody makes it out to be. Because I think even with if we would do an eccentric only reps and say having somebody help you through the concentric portion, that's difficult. We tend to do eccentric emphasis reps where you are in fact doing the concentric portion also, but you're trying to emphasize the eccentric. So I think there's a lot of room there. the one thing I would say, just in general, is that, and this goes back kind of, Cal, Dietz, and those guys talk about triphasic training, and I always feel like everybody's always trying to make everything more complicated than it is, but the reality is you do need some amount of isometric and eccentric training in your training cycle. So if I'm going to be there for 12 weeks training, at some point I've got to have a little eccentric emphasis and a little bit of isometric emphasis.
All right, Coach, good stuff. We're going to let you go, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, Ant, it's always a pleasure. You know that, and I appreciate it. Thank you for all the great stuff you do for me.
All right, now it's time for the Ask the Equipment Experts, and I'm here with the ultimate equipment expert, Erin McGurr. Erin, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we got a lot of stuff. You have a lot of stuff going on with the catalog. We got a new line that you're adding, but let's talk about the sale first. What do you got?
Right now, we are having orders over $50. You get a free 10-pack of mini bands. I know how popular they are, and I know a lot of people always throw them in just on top of their order. So now it's kind of like you're getting them for free if you order anything over $50. So we don't limit what pack you get. It's kind of you get to pick, so it's always a good option. So anyone that needs a couple extra bands, now's the time to throw those in there.
All right, very cool. New Jersey One Day is coming up on December 5th. I assume the early bird's gone, but I know you guys always sell out. Jersey always sells out. So
it does.
Where are you guys?
Jersey's always crazy. It's a madhouse down there. As far as the early bird, I should know this, but I have a feeling it may have just ended. If anyone's listening and they call in, we can always honor that. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, it should be ending any day now. But yeah, I know we already have a ton of people signed up. I know we normally have a waiting list for New Jersey, which is great, but we have Brandon Marcello, Charlie Weingroff, Martin Rooney, and Alan Cosgrove doing that one. So it's going to be pretty cool. Obviously, Alan will cover some business stuff. Martin will cover some coaching. Charlie's going to do some program design, and Brandon's going to do some linear and lateral speed development. So whole different aspects across the board. So it'll be cool to see those. I always like going because I get to kind of hear the topics for the first time all year. So I'm sure I'll hear them a lot, but it's always nice to hear them the first time.
Yeah, man, very cool. And also at the One Days, well, at least in Jersey, you guys are in the room, so at least you do get to kind of hear all the lectures. Whereas a lot of times, for example, with the summits, they're all separated, unless you're working the hands-on. But if you're working the hands-on at the summits, you're usually pretty busy because that's like nonstop, so you don't get to see anything.
Exactly. I know.
You just finished you're about to. With the new catalog, but we won't talk about that yet. But you have a new line, equipment line, weight line. Tell us about it.
We do. Something that we've been getting a lot of questions on over the last couple of years. We always get people looking for stuff that we don't have, which I know we sell a ton of stuff, but one of the things that kind of separates us from a lot of our competitors is we will try and get anything we can for you. So whether or not it's in the catalog or on our website, a lot of times we still deal with certain manufacturers that can get us some stuff. So one of the issues we were kind of tossing around or just hearing a lot of were people looking for, different racks or different benches or something like that. So we actually are going to start carrying Legend fitness equipment, which, everything's made in the U.S., great line. They do a ton of custom colors at no additional charge. But what it's going to allow us to do is just have a whole other line of equipment to offer to our customers, which is nice. But everything from decline benches, they have a functional trainer half rack, which is pretty cool, which is actually a half rack on the front, and then on the back it's got two pulley systems like a functional trainer. So
that's very cool. That's space saving in terms of space saving. And I know, you guys have done a lot of work on kind of adding to racks, so, like with pull-up bars and the connectors, et cetera. But that seems pretty interesting in a big room because there is that kind of the back of the rack is a kind of wasted space.
Yeah, especially for people that don't put it up against a wall.
Yeah.
So it's, that's pretty cool. And even the accessories they have, whether it's a rotating pull-up bar, dip attachments, landmine attachments, things like that a lot of companies will either not offer at all, or it's just hard to really get. So everything from platforms, half racks, power racks, the functional trainer half rack that I mentioned, those are going to be added, which is really cool to just be able to offer this line, and it is great equipment. And another thing, they're awesome to deal with, so I love that.
Cool.
But some of the accessory pieces that were really hard to get, and again, it's funny because I think they're so common, but they're not. So, like a lat pull down low row combo, they're so hard to get, and a lot of companies nowadays make them two separate pieces. But for a lot of facilities, they're looking obviously for space saving equipment. So that's going to be something we're able to offer: a high-low pulley, another glute ham, even squat stands that don't have a connector in the middle. It's amazing how many people are looking for a pair of squat stands, and the ones we've always had, you couldn't separate them or pull them apart. But things like that we're going to be able to start carrying. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to it. I know there's been a lot of people looking for this stuff already, so it's going to start getting up on our website. Like I said, it is going to be in our new catalog coming up, but I know everyone here is really excited to kind of start pushing it and see how it does. And I mean, with all the equipment we offer, UCS, York, PB Extreme, Free Motion, it's just great to have a whole other line that we can incorporate just so, I mean, I know a lot of strength coaches are set on preference and different things. So now that we can just open this up a little bit more and give people more options, it's just going to help everyone in the long run. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, very cool. Everybody keep your eye out for that Legend line. So awesome. E, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about the sale and the upcoming One Day in New Jersey on December 5th and the new Legend line.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Joel Sanders here with The Art of Coaching with Exos. Growing up in South Georgia, it's not hard to be drawn to the drink of choice, bourbon. The two foundational bourbons that can be found at pretty much every bar without fail are Jim Beam and Jack Daniels. When I first tried each, they pretty much tasted the same to me. After enough experience and college weekends gone past, not only did I have a different taste, but I could tell them apart simply by the aroma that each gave off. This concept can be applied to barbells too, I think. When I was first introduced to strength training, I figured that a barbell was a barbell. But as I got more experience under the bar, I learned that certain bars have specific purposes. Now, there are a litany of barbells. I guess just like when I go to Total Wine and I can find honey-flavored bourbon or cinnamon-flavored. But let's stick to the basic barbells. At Exos, our Jim and Jack of barbells are an Olympic weightlifting barbell and a powerlifting barbell. Let's go over each a little bit. So Olympic barbells live on the platforms. They're primarily used for Olympic lifting and ballistic movements, like we'll use them for barbell complexes, for instance. And then powerlifting bars, and in our case, more specifically, we'll use a Texas power bar. Those live in the racks. They're meant for rugged, grinding lifts, bench, squat, and kind of everyday power rack use. So what are the main differences between each bar? And maybe if you don't have as much experience with them, or if you don't know the specifics. So there are four main categories of each bar where some of them you'll be tactile and you'll be able to tell the difference, and others may not be a feel or a look. It may actually be the actual functionality of it. So the first difference between Olympic weightlifting bars and a Texas power bar is in the knurling. And from a looks perspective, when you look at an Olympic weightlifting barbell, in the middle of the bar, it should be smooth and there should be really no knurling. And that's just to allow for a cleaner catch, so it doesn't stick to to your torso in the front rack position. And then as you move outward on the barbell, there will obviously be knurling, but it should be less aggressive and coarse, so that there's just a little bit less friction during, ballistics or Olympic movements. And then with a Texas power bar, there's definitely knurling right in the middle of the bar, so that kind of bites into your back, especially on squats. And then the knurling throughout the bar is much more aggressive and coarse, so it sticks to your hand, and there's just a better contact with the bar. So that's the difference in knurling. The thickness of the bar, Olympic weightlifting bar is going to be most of the times a 0.5 millimeter thinner than a Texas power bar. The Texas power bar just a touch thicker, a little bit more rigid and sturdy there. The third category is the tensile strength. So with the Olympic weightlifting bar, it'll have a little less tensile strength, which will give the bar more whip. Whip is the ability of the bar to bend and then return to straight, especially used with Olympic movements, to allow for a cleaner catch and give to the bar. Whereas a Texas power bar is going to have more tensile strength and very little whip. So that bar is rigid, and it's meant for our big bang benching and squatting and power racks. And then last but not least, the fourth category is the actual sleeve of the barbell. With Olympic weightlifting barbells, if you actually put your hand on the sleeve and give it a spin as if you were spinning a wheel on a pair of roller skates, that sleeve should spin around. Typically it's going to have a ball bearing or bushing that allows it to spin, and it'll keep spinning for a little while. And whereas Texas power bars, if you give them a spin, the sleeve will move, but not a lot. There's just a little spin on there. So those are the four key differences: the knurling, thickness, the tensile strength, or the whip on the bar, and then finally the sleeve and how much it actually spins. Those are differences between a Texas power bar and an Olympic weightlifting bar. Know your barbells and your bourbon. On behalf of Exos Education, I'm Joel Sanders. To learn more, visit us as teamexos.com/education.
Hi, I'm Frank Dolan, and I'm here to discuss today, as part of the Functional Movement Systems segment, a new series on the basics of the FMS. It's just a basic review of the fundamental things like the verbal instructions, some tips for testing, the criteria for each test, and then some of the nuances that are often missed with each test. Today we're going to discuss the deep squat. One of the things that's important about the deep squat is to understand that we are just looking at these criteria, and that we need, for consistency and reliability, to have the verbal instructions be the same across the board. So everyone doing a functional movement screen test and doing the deep squat has to be using those same verbal instructions. When learning the deep squat, it's important to utilize your own language when learning to view the criteria in the same way, but then eventually mold the way that you're doing the squat and use the verbal instructions in the manual. They are as follows. You want to ask the client that they please let you know if they have any pain while performing the movement, that they tell you. You're going to instruct them to stand tall with feet approximately shoulder width apart and toes pointed directly forward. They'll grasp the dowel in both hands and place it horizontally on top of their head so they know that their shoulders and elbows are at 90 degrees. You're going to check their elbows, make sure they're at 90 with their hand position. They'll press the dowel so that it's directly above their head. While maintaining an upright torso and keeping their heels and the dowel in position overhead, they'll descend as deep as possible. They'll hold that descended position for a count of 1, then return to the starting position. You would then instruct them to tell you if they understand the instructions. The equipment needed here is just going to be a 2x6 and the dowel. Some of the tips for testing on the deep squat are that the client can perform the movement up to 3 times if necessary. If they're unable to perform the test with the heels flat, you would then give them an additional 3 chances to check with the heels elevated. If a score of 3 is not achieved, they repeat the above instructions using the 2x6 under the heels. You will observe the client from the front and the sides. You're going to want to move around. All positions, including the foot position, should remain unchanged when the heels are elevated with either the FMS kit or a smaller size board. Some of the common questions, mistakes, and some of the nuances that are often missed in the deep squat test is that the foot position changes, whether that's kind of that bad game of telephone or someone that just learned it incorrectly. We want to make sure that the foot position is straight, regardless of how you squat in the gym for exercise. For the test, we want to make sure the toes are pointed straight ahead. If loss of balance happens at the top of the screen, that's another one where the squat actually might look good, but then they lose balance at the finish of the test. That's another issue that we want to make sure we're catching. We want to make sure we're moving around the client, not just staying in one place. We move from the side to the front or from the front to the side. We do not demo the movement or show them in advance. We also don't allow them to do it in a mirror. We don't want to give them that extra cueing of being able to see themselves in the mirror. We want them to do the test with shoes on, some type of footwear that they would train in. They're going to perform, as mentioned earlier, 3 reps with the heels down. If they're able to do that, we don't have to move on to the 3 reps with the heels up. It's a common question. We want to use the note section on the scorecard as a way to write down observations, but not to write down what you think the issue is. It's a common mistake where we start to try to play detective and figure out what the issue is with the squat. It's important to write down observations of what you're seeing, but not as it pertains to what you think the problem is. Just look at the score, 3, 2, 1, or 0, and write down any kind of weird stuff that you see. If the movement is performed as a 3, but there still is pain with the movement, it's still a 0. We want to make sure that we're holding for 1 second at the bottom of the squat. That's often missed. That's part of those instructions, those verbal instructions. We do want to see a quick pause at the bottom before they come back up. We want to also make sure that their heels, when they're checking for a 2, that you're careful that the heels are on the board, not their midfoot. We don't want them all the way up and over the top of the board. Just the heels need to be up there with toes straight ahead. Okay, then we'll look at really quickly some of the criteria. To get a 3 on the squat, the upper torso must be parallel with the tibia or toward vertical. The other criteria is that the femur must be below horizontal, or their butt needs to be below the knees. The knees should be aligned over the feet, and the dowel needs to be aligned over the feet. So we shouldn't see any valgus in the knees or knees pointed out. They should be lined up with the feet with the heels flat, and the dowel should be aligned over the footprint of where the feet are. A 2, it's the same criteria as a 3, except that we have the heels elevated. And as mentioned earlier, just the heels, not the midfoot on the board. To get a 1, you would miss one of those criteria with the heels elevated. So the tibia and upper torso is not parallel, the femur is not below horizontal, knees not aligned over the feet, and the dowel not aligned over the footprint. If pain is present, we're going to give that client a 0 for that portion of the test, and a medical professional should perform a thorough evaluation of that painful area to make sure we find out what the issue is there before we go ahead and have that person go through exercise. Thanks a lot for listening. This has been the first installment of the series on the FMS basics. You just listened to the deep squat, and next week we'll be back with the hurdle step. For more information, check out functionalmovement.com.
Hey everybody, it's Rachel Cosgrove. This is the Strength Coach Podcast, Business of Fitness segment. I'm here with Results Fitness University, and I'm excited today to talk to you about a little bit about balance. This thing called balance. I think everyone, we always hear about, I really want to get balance in my life. And I think as you open a gym, a lot of you I know are thinking about opening a gym or building your clientele. Maybe eventually your goal is to have your own facility. Things can get crazy and things can get out of balance. And, really, how do we reach that point of balance? And I actually just did a talk on this with our clients this week. And they actually, one of the things that we talked about was how, really balance in life. I don't believe there's ever truly a moment where you're like, everything's in balance. I think, when you do have that moment, usually life will, then come and hit you with something new. So it's really keeping yourself able to go with that flux, able to go with, whatever's going to come up in your life at any moment. So a great tool that I've used that I learned in a life coaching certification was what's called the Wheel of Life. Google it, look it up. Basically, you score yourself in all the different areas of your life. And really to figure out, as far as balance goes, how am I doing in all areas of my life? How am I doing with my career? How am I doing with my health and fitness? How am I doing with money? How am I doing with my social, like my social life? Do I have a social life? How am I doing with friends and family? What about my spiritual side? Am I really nurturing every area of my life? And I think that's a great tool to start on the path to feeling more balanced, is to really look at, where am I lacking? And when you score yourself on that, you'll notice in certain areas of your life, maybe you are lacking. Maybe you feel like, this area I do need to do some work on. Well, guess what? You got to get out of balance in order to make progress in any area of your life. So if you're trying to drive your business and you're trying to build it and trying to make more money, maybe money is one of those that you're lacking in. Well, guess what? You're going to have to step out of balance to make progress in one area. And so really thinking about that, swinging yourself so that you're able to push in one area of your life to really take it to the next level, take it to a level that then, fits with the rest of the categories in your life, so that it's not actually pulling energy from any of the other sections of your life, if that makes sense. So when you do have, say, money is, something you're unsatisfied with in your life, guess what? That's probably going to affect your health and fitness, right? Because maybe you have more stress. And so now it's going to affect other areas of your life. So doing that quick exercise, just kind of taking inventory of where are you at in all the different areas of your life, and then really, deciding, hey, you know what, I'm going to go after this specific goal in this area of my life. I want to save X amount of money. I want to get out of debt. I want to, maybe it's a health and fitness goal, whatever it might be, to really go ahead and say it's okay for me to really step out of my comfort zone and really push in one area of my life to make progress to get to that next level. And I think that's important to know, because you are always in flux, and so it's really hard to, I think, ever truly be in balance. So really making sure you're in control of it and you decide, really what you're going to get out of balance for and what you're going after. And I think, that's what's going to lead to that long-term sustainable growth in all areas of your life, and really feeling like, you do have that balance that's multifaceted, that's really taking place in all areas of your life. So try out that exercise, take a quick inventory of where you're at, set some goals in the area that you feel like you're lacking in, really push yourself in that area and see how you feel, see how that works, as far as making you feel like, I actually now have more balance in my life because I'm well-rounded and I've made a priority the thing that I was feeling unsatisfied in. So hopefully that gives you something to work with. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, this is Rachel Cosgrove with Results Fitness University. Check out our website. We're giving constant tips every week at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Make sure you sign up for the email list to stay in the loop. Have a great day.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach. And although he's not completely a strength coach, we have on Jonathan Fass, physical therapist, who has, you might know him from the FitCast, and that's where today's discussion is going to go from an interview that Kevin did with John on pain. So, John, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, very, very happy to be here. Thanks for asking me. I was a strength coach, sort of, kind of, a little bit at Rutgers, sort of, kind of, little bit.
Okay. Not completely. Yeah, that's fine.
A little street cred.
There you go. John, there's really interesting stuff going on right now in pain. MovementLectures.com had sent me some of the Lorimer Mosley did a DVD on it, a lecture, and it gets kind of technical, so it's kind of hard. I think your interview on the FitCast for me was kind of really very easy to understand, and I know you've been doing a lot because your wife has been in a lot of it. She suffers from chronic pain.
Yep.
I think it's interesting because I think it's so funny where we end up. Like, for example, John Berardi, we heard him, everybody's heard of John Berardi, and, we think of him as a nutritionist, but when you go hear him speak now, he talks all about the behavior of change, right? More than, protein and carbs, or, what we've had on this show and what's really become popular is the art of coaching, right? So it's not only, how many sets and reps, and we have to know how to speak to people. And I think this really falls in line with the art of coaching, and people are going to understand why in a little bit. But talk to us about how you started to, because I mean, you're a physical therapist, so obviously, and I know you said this on the Fitcast, was, you think you would have, you kind of kicked yourself in the ass a little bit, like, why didn't I learn this sooner? I'm a physical therapist. So talk to us a little bit about how you kind of got here and what's going on with pain right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating area of research. It's so complex. Like you said, I mean, Lorimer's lecture, I saw that. It was just beautiful, and it's very dense. And what's scary is that it's not even, it's the general concept of, I mean, there's, we'll put it that way. There's an encyclopedia basically of pain. It's like what is it, like $300-400 book that I own, that it's like, I mean, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of all the information that they know right now. And everyone recognizes, like, they understand a lot, but there is so much that we don't understand. So it's this really deep, complex kind of field of study that draws in neuroscience and biomechanics and physiology and psychology and sociology and neuropsychology and cognitive behavior. And it's crazy. So what got me interested, I think, I started picking up things here and there when I would be, researching online something, and I would come across a paper that would basically contradict a lot of the things that we might have learned as physical therapy students or as physical therapists practicing. These kind of these ideas, the theories that we might have as to how injuries occur, how pain is part of it. And it always seemed like pain was just this thing that happens when you have a physical injury, and that's kind of what you're taught almost. And you start to see little things that poke holes, and then you start to see things in clinic that kind of pokes holes in those ideas too. And you do all the right things, and yet something doesn't seem right in the conclusion, or someone gets worse for something that you would expect to be innocuous and not matter at all. And there's always this issue of chronic pain of patients that come in, my back hurts. Oh, what did you do? I don't know. And that just seems weird. And we accept that as part of our life and our reality. But when you stop and think about that, does that really make any sense at all? Should someone just come in and have pain? And what did you do? I don't know. I just, I sat down. I took a step. It seems strange. Yeah. So those kind of questions and those little, sort of those voices that you hear in the back of your head going, something's not right here. You start to follow that path. And if you're fortunate, you'll stumble into this area, this huge area of research that really has been going on for 40, 50 years, saying we are not going in the right direction when we only classify pain as an outcome of something else, or as this thing that happens because I hurt myself from injury, and that chronic pain is just ongoing little things that are happening in your body, and then all of a sudden you have pain or something like that, and getting into the idea of predicting pain and predicting injury and these really extremely complex areas that are just seem to be a little oversimplified in our general awareness. Even as professionals, it's just a little oversimplified. So once you go down into that area, things start to make a little bit more sense, because you realize, wow, we maybe have been looking at things a little bit not entirely complete. And that completion, although it's complex, just adds so much more to your understanding and your ability to help and to coach and to do all these things that we want to do as professionals.
And like you said, when people come in, I think it's more the norm that first of all, I'm mostly general population. I'm not mostly, I'm all general population. Mm-hmm. I work with golfers, but I don't consider them, very few elite golfers that are just doing this for a living. Right. So, everybody who comes in, they have some kind of pain story. And I think, like you said, more often than not, it's, my back. I always I ask them the questions, and then they say, well, you have back pain. What is that? Just the general back pain, like that. And they're like, yeah. Everybody, it's almost like it's just understood. Right. And I think you're right. It's funny because sometimes I think, okay, I got the back program now. Everybody who comes in here, I've had so much success with this. And then somebody comes in and then they tell me, my back's been really bothering me. I'm like, that can't be from me,
Right.
and that couldn't have happened here. No one, I would never hurt anybody's back. And I think it's a really tough thing. And then I think, John, another thing is, and you would understand this just based on, the conversations I know that you have with strength coaches and trainers and other therapists, is that, there's this idea of crossing the line, right? Are we crossing the line as strength coaches and physical as trainers, and are we going too far? And pain seems like something for the doctor, but I think there's so much that we as trainers and coaches can really need to understand about this. It's really important. So I think a good start would be, because it was for me on the FitCast when you started explaining this idea of the nocebo. And for me, it was really important because I had first kind of heard something from Art Horn about pain associations or pathways and, in general. And this does sound like it's just in your head. But,
right.
Every time I go to the gym, I get hurt. So now all of a sudden they're always going to associate the gym with hurt. More likely, every time I squat, my knees hurt. So that's something we always hear. I can't overhead press because it always hurts my shoulder, whatever. But talk to us about this whole idea of the nocebo and these associations.
Sure. Yeah. I think what would be helpful. So exactly what you said, like the idea of nocebo or placebo, it's all in your head, and we have this kind of dichotomy. We think that you're either hurting because you injured yourself, or you're hurting because it's in your head. You've made it up. If I can't find the physical cause, then it must be mental, and mental is not real, right? That's sort of, and we may not say that, but implicitly we sort of feel that way as a society. And this newer concept of pain, the research is showing that it's not all or nothing. It's not all physical. It's not all mental either, and it's not all social. But all of those things can come together to produce a physical experience in a person. So the way that I explain this to patients or to anyone else, I give this example. So imagine that we're standing right now in a field, and it's a beautiful spring day. The sun's shining. There's a couple clouds in the sky. Birds are singing. It's a beautiful, wonderful day. Field full of flowers, and I hand you a bag of roses. And I ask you, hey, could you walk out, like 300 feet, in that direction, right? Is this a problem for you? Do you feel like this would be an issue? I'm asking, right? It'd be pretty good, right? I mean, it's not, it's a fun thing. Take your shoes off, feel the grass under your feet. It's good. Let's change this just slightly. Let's say instead of this beautiful field, I bring you to the worst part of, I live right outside of Philly. So the worst part of Philadelphia, and it's not 2 p.m, it's 2 a.m. And we're in this dark alleyway. And you know what? I'm pretty sure there was a murder here the other week. And I know there's a lot of crime right around the corner. I think it's like a drug dealer, crack den kind of place. And I hand you the same bag, but it's not full of roses. It's full of cash. And just to make sure that you realize that, I put a big dollar sign right on the bag. And I ask you, hey, could you just walk down this alley like 300 feet? Are you happy about this?
No.
No, right? This is something very different. And you would experience something different too, right? Your heart would start to pound. Your blood pressure increases. You've got, adrenaline flowing through you. This is a huge stress response, right? But as a strength coach, did I change anything? Right? Is the bag heavier? Did you run instead of walk? Did I ask you to do anything physically different? No. But yet, your physical response to that is about night and day, literally, as the example is, right? Completely different. So you experience something physically real from changing the environment. But we can go back and mess around more. You said that was the field, the grass and the flowers, that's a great thing, right? But what if you have hay fever, really horrible hay fever, and you don't have your emergency, inhaler on you, and that bag of flowers is already starting to make your eyes water and your nose close up and your lungs close up? Is this suddenly a good thing anymore? No, of course not, right? Of course not. If we go back to the alley, and right before I sent you out there, I plugged you in like Neo in the Matrix, and I downloaded Now You Know Kung Fu. Are you so worried anymore? Probably not, right? You might actually enjoy it. You might be like, oh, cool, practice, right? If we go back to the field, and instead of the same bag is full of bricks, is that fun anymore? Maybe not. If you're like a CrossFitter, Tough Mudder, you're going to pay me money to do it though, right? So what I've done here in this example, we can change little details and see extreme differences in our response to those details, but not all of them are physical. That last example was physical, yet even that physical example is also based on what you think of what that physical means. If you're, a couch potato kind of person, carrying a bag of bricks 300 feet is going to be awful, and you're going to hate it, and your response is going to be different. But if you're, strength guy, Tough Mudder, GPP, all this kind of stuff, and you're carrying a bag of bricks, you might run. You'll be like, yeah, great exercise, and you'll be totally excited about it. If I put you in that bad environment, that alleyway, that's an awful place unless it's not awful to you, because your experience of it is different. You're a kung fu master. You're the greatest fighter that movies have ever seen. So it doesn't matter to you. You might actually like it. That whole scenario and all those different things putting together, that's essentially how pain works in our body. It's not just physical. Only one of those examples was a physical change. Another was environment. Another was psychological and how you feel about the environment. And how you feel about the task. So we get very different true physical responses from things that are well beyond just the biomechanics, just the activity. What we think about the activity, where we perform this activity has at least as much of an influence as the actual activity itself. That brings us to nocebo and placebo, right? It's no longer an idea of, oh, this is in your head, and I gave you a pill, but oops, it's a sugar pill, but haha, you're so dumb, you had a response anyway. That's not what it is. What that means is that we are changing details, and that works on what the individual thinks those details means. And not just the physical thing that happens when you take a pill or take any medicine, but what is your expectation of medicine? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? What do I expect will happen when I take medicine? Will I get better, or will it have side effects and I'll get worse? That's what placebo and nocebo are all about. So although we think of it as these things that happen, what they really are is manipulations of how pain works and expectation works and stress response works in our bodies. And that's not just the brain. That's the entire learned experience of what your history of medicine and what you think it represents. It's what our environment, what our society says. Is medicine good or is it bad? Your political beliefs, your social beliefs, your everything that goes into meaning and what these things mean. Pain wouldn't make any sense if all it did was respond to something, right? It wouldn't make sense if I break a bone and then I have pain, because what's better than pain after the break? Pain before it, because pain before it will change your behavior and prevent what might be a break in the first place. So it's like a check engine light in your car. The check engine light doesn't make any sense if it only comes on when the oil is gone, because your car is already totaled. Your engine just froze. So what's the point of a light? So the light needs to come on before so that you can change your behavior. You can change action to prevent that catastrophic event. But how do we determine catastrophic? We determine that through history. We determine that through psychology and what we believe is bad. And we also determine that through the physical information that's coming from nerves and from the bones and the muscles and the biomechanics. So all of those things can be relevant depending on what's going on and the individual that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Actually, it's for me, just kind of listening to that again and you elaborate even more. It can be confusing because part of me says, okay, wait, John, are you saying it's all in my head? I know you're not saying that, right?
Right.
And is it all because of the environment? I have a white lab coat on when my people come in, and
Right.
I have a really clean place, and I have a great reputation as the guy. I'm called, the fixer, but somebody still got hurt. So just talk to us about kind of not about it, just this idea about that people will say, well, that's you're just saying it's in my head.
Right. And that's a very common thing, and I'm glad you brought this up because the information can be confusing. It really starts to kind of mess with you because someone in the audience may be doing certain things and they're basing their system on a certain aspect of this, right? So biomechanics, very likely, right? I can't turn this way because my hip will go here and then my back will do that and the lumbar spine can't turn. And these sort of, beliefs that we have, especially in training, but certainly in physical therapy as well and medicine, the idea is it's the biomedical kind of theory of pain and health and disease, this idea that physical causes physical things. What ends up happening is that you can think of this as a little bit, the concept here that I'm talking about is called biopsychosocial. And that's just acknowledging the fact that it's biological and biomechanical, but it's also aspects of psychological and also aspects of sociological. All of those things come into play here. It doesn't mean necessarily that one thing will take over, right? That's singular thinking, right? We want to kind of minimize it so that we can only deal with one thing. But in fact, all things occur at once. The challenge and the problem is knowing what combination of things is occurring in any individual that you're looking at that's sitting across from you while you're taking their history, right? When they say, yeah, I have this history of back pain, what does that mean? Does it mean that there's been physical damage repeated over and over and over again? Maybe. Is it mean that there are physical changes that occur to the nerves and to the central nervous system and the brain in terms of history and memory once an injury occurs? That may be it too, because those things occur. You get, that's why when you'll always hear about someone that broke a limb and then they can feel the weather, right? It's going to be, it's going to rain. I can tell because my shoulder is hurting. That's my old injury. There are actually reasons for that. The nerves become more sensitive. It becomes more efficient at getting information, and even the receptors and the areas that we will get information from on the nerve itself that's on the place of the initial injury, it's more dense, right? And it makes sense. If there was a problem once before, you always want to know if that problem is going to occur a little bit. You want to get an advance warning. So there are true physical reasons why someone can have an injury of some type, and it'll always sort of be a little bit more sensitive there than there has been in the past. But there's also the memory of, I hurt my knee once, and that maybe I need to be careful of my knee. So you're a little bit more, kind of aware of that. You're a little bit more, punch shy kind of thing. You got knocked out once. You don't want to get knocked out again. So you're always a little quicker to respond to the flinch, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of what's happening here. So sometimes we can have pain without any physical thing. That's what phantom limb pain is famously. There's no body part there, but people feel the body part and they actually feel pain. It's like, I think it's 80% or so of amputees will experience this. And that's something right there. There's no physical there at all, but they feel pain. And the other side of it is everyone has had the experience of a bruise that they don't know how they got it, right? You see a bruise in your arm, you go, where did that come from? That's real physical damage, but there was no pain from it. You were never aware of it. It just happened. So those two examples to me, I think, are very obvious examples into how it's not just a physical damage, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the opposite is true either. It's not just psychological. That's the idea of hysteria, right? That's hysteria and people are hysterical. That doesn't really happen either. And it's not just social. I mean, if people are telling you, oh, you should be hurting, there is influence. We're social animals. We get a lot of information from the people around us. That's the idea of like the contagious yawn, right? There's social information that occurs. So you suddenly yawn, and you're like, why did I just do that? So all of this stuff just comes into play, and it fills in to what the ultimate decision is. Should I have a response to whatever the stimulus is? And that stimulus may or may not reach response level, but it's a lot more than just the stimulus itself. So we don't want to think of it as just being in the head. We don't want to overcomplicate it either. It is complicated, but as far as the level of the gym floor and helping people to feel good, what we don't want to do is we don't want to introduce more, possible causes for pain. That's, again, what the nocebo is kind of all about. We don't want to say, oh, don't squat that way because you will hurt your back or you might hurt your back, because for the wrong individual, meaning the person that would take this information negatively, what they're hearing is squatting wrong hurts me.
Yeah.
And now what does squatting right mean to them? Is it so exact that any variation from that exactness will be dangerous? And if it's danger is what pain is, it's a signal of threat. It's a signal of possible danger. I always think of the with that old sci-fi show where it's like danger, danger. The computer.
Lost in space.
Yes, thank you. Danger, danger. That's what I think of when I think of pain. It's this little robot that's following you, going danger, danger. Don't do this. Don't do that. And it's basically the brain communicating with itself. It's the subconscious communicating with the conscious, essentially. And it's saying, don't do this because either something did just happen or something might happen. So we want to take that might out of the equation, not make it more than it is. We don't want to think the world is against us. We don't want to think squatting is bad. Squatting is good, right? Or lunges or whatever it is good. So we can coach in a direction, but let's not coach in the anti-direction. Let's not say this is bad for you, but rather I prefer you to do this because it's good for you. And then what we're doing is we're educating our clients or our athletes, especially athletes whose livelihood or well-being depends on them being out of injury, out of pain, so that they can perform their best, right? And we're telling them, think in the positive, because if you think in the negative can be anything. And now you've set someone up for potentially thinking something that is otherwise relatively safe, maybe not the best, but it's not bad. And now it's bad because their coach or their trainer said, don't do that. It's bad for you. On an assumption. We don't know that it really is. It's on an assumption. Why do some people tear ACLs and others don't? And why? Every individual is different. So, right, we don't want them to squat with their knees popping inwards or whatever it is. But there's two ways of saying it. You can say, hey, push out, or get your knees in line. You'll feel more power. It'll feel more comfortable. It'll feel great. Or get your legs out. I'm telling you, another couple reps and it's going to hurt you. You don't want to do that. There's no validation for that because you don't know that the individual standing in front of you, that would actually happen. But what you've done is you primed them now. You've told them this stuff is bad. And now when they're walking off that step and their brain is constantly receiving information on position, movement, velocity, muscle, all these things, and it detects that knee move inwards, that brings up that memory of you, the coach, saying, don't do that, it's bad. So if pain is that threat sign, it's saying change what you're doing. They just felt a tinge of pain there because they were told that that's bad and they remembered it. And there was some information coming in. There was all this kind of stuff, but you kind of sent it a little over the edge.
Yeah, and I guess it might not have been the reason, but if they did feel some pain because it was painful, they might exacerbate the whole thing because they're in their brain now. They're like, "Oh my God, I rolled my ankle and I felt a little something," and they're going to start going down a whole new direction.
Right, it can possibly do that too. It's really that's an aspect of it. It's how does someone experience pain afterwards? See, no one experiences pain exactly the same way, or at least we can't say that they do. It's an individual experience. So exactly what you're saying there. What I may feel some physical, I'll get nervous information that something, there's a little stress here or whatever it was. For one individual, they may not feel it at all. They was determined that it wasn't really threatening. Hey, been here 1,000 times, no big deal. Someone else might feel a little something. Hey, we're getting a little too close. Let's change the way we're moving. Why don't you lay off of this knee so pain will change the behavior and the change the movement, right? So the little pain might actually be a good thing. It changes you. But that third person will experience that, and suddenly now there's anxiety, there's stress, there's what does this mean? If I'm a running back and I feel a little tinge on my knee, how many running backs have you seen over your lifetime fall from an ACL injury, torn this, torn that, right? That is a death sentence for many professional players. That might freak this person out, and suddenly there's, oh my goodness, it's a feedback, right? So what seemed to be a little innocuous but caused a little bit of a response, which outputted as pain, is suddenly, what does the pain mean? What is the meaning of this? Will I get better? Will my livelihood end? Will my dreams end? And that can, kind of catastrophically, it's called catastrophizing, that can result for, again, the wrong individual, wrong place, wrong time, into something very bad. But if we back that up and that individual never had those beliefs, then that whole scenario never happened. And I think that that's where the power of the coach or the trainer comes into play. It comes into play in what we can do to truly prevent, not necessarily pain itself per se, but hopefully at least make it less of an issue. We can empower our clients or our athletes or even our patients into believing in the miracle of healing and that they'll get better, and to not go down this very, very nasty place of catastrophizing and never-ending pain cycles. And I think many of us have probably seen things like that. We've either seen it happen right before us, or we get the client come in saying, yeah, I've had this for years. I can't even do this anymore. I can't even do that anymore, based on beliefs of what it means to do this or to do that, to bend forward or to squat or whatever it is. Those are very scary, horrible places that if they can't be entirely avoided, at least we can do our best to help that individual not believe that in the first place.
Well, it's tough because what I was going to ask also is, can we make things worse by, not by forgetting about it, but we're coaching them in these positive ways. Mm-hmm. Let's say they are developing some micro trauma. And then a couple of years down the road, they go to the doctor. Right. And, doc, wow, I'm getting some knee pain. This is, let's say it's 5 years away.
Sure.
And we know, that's what I mean. That's why I was saying this is hard, because we're dealing with doctors who are saying, well, you don't pick up anything over 3 pounds, and squatting. Oh my God, you can't squat. So now he's put it in their head, or she's put it in their head. But can we make, I don't know how to phrase that question, but can we make things worse by, or not worse, but eventually can we be going down a bad path? So over time, right now we did the right thing and they weren't experiencing pain because we didn't mention pain, but maybe there's developing some micro trauma. Is that like maybe something down the road that we can, maybe people can experience?
Well, it's a great question, and let's kind of take that apart. First, the idea of micro trauma. Trauma heals. So unless we're constantly, literally walking into a wall every minute, trauma heals. So the couple of reps and sets of squats that you're doing, or whatever it is, we're picking on squats, but whatever it is, that stuff heals. If it doesn't heal, we've got a lot of problems. Like, tissue that doesn't heal is dead tissue. It's gangrenous. It's much worse than having, some type of ache 5 years later. Now, 5 years, and I know there's an example, but that's a legitimate question because that's out there, right? This idea that we're constantly doing the wrong things, but they're so minor that it's only a little bit, but over time it just accumulates. The assumption there, I think, I don't want to put words into people's mouths, but the assumption there is that stuff either doesn't heal, it accumulates, it's a slow leak that eventually you get it flat, right? But if it doesn't heal, then we've got a big problem. We can recognize that. And over a long period of time, was that little thing occurring really the issue? Over so many years, in unbelievable, literally infinite possible factors, why do we think that it was that little micro trauma that was the influencer? Now, specifically to address that, they've done a lot of research on this sort of question, right? How does lifting affect future injury or future pain? They'll look at a year, they'll look at 2 years. They've done studies that go for 20, 30 years because they'll take images in like the 80s and then they'll return decades later. None of that predicts pain. Isn't that fascinating? None of it predicts pain. Things they found on imaging and herniations and fraying of the meniscus, and there's no clear and definite, yep, all those people, or 9 out of those 10 were experiencing nothing at all. It's literally hit or miss, and which makes you start to wonder, is it there at all? So one of the most fascinating studies, and I absolutely love this one, they looked at, it was something, I forget how many, 50, 60, however many kids, elite tennis players in the youth ranks. So these are where the next crop of professionals will come from. There were something like between 12 and 19 years of age, and they ran them all through MRIs. They found unbelievable things that would shock you, herniations and fractures of the spine and crazy stuff that anyone would look at an image and go, oh my God, you must be suffering. They're all playing at elite levels, no experiences of pain. They were just found. So now we're talking microtrauma? Really? Because these guys are playing elite level tennis with fractured spines. So something else is going on there. So to answer that question, can we do more damage over time? Well, my answer would generally be no, unless you ignore what's there. Meaning, is someone reporting pain and you're saying, oh no, I heard this physical therapist said it's all in your head or something, so don't worry about it. Right. That's not what it is. Pain is first and foremost a signal, and it's saying something appears to be wrong. Now, there could be something wrong in the physical body, or there could be something wrong in the assumption of where this is headed. And whatever that combination of things is, and it could be both, right? It could be something physically wrong, and it could be headed to an even worse place over time. But whatever it is, the brain is and make no mistake, it's the entirety of the brain. It's when you see pain in an individual and they take like these functional MRIs of the brain itself, the whole brain essentially lights up, or every area at least, or most areas. It's called a neurotag. It's what happens when a person feels this particular experience of pain under these circumstances. And the things that light up are not just like this one area. We think that there's this like pain center in the brain. It's not. It's the entire brain lighting up because it's taking that information and it's trying to put it together. It's trying to piece it together into something that makes sense. You can almost think of like a CEO with a boardroom. Memories. What's your input? Muscles. What's your input? As far as the motor system. And limbic. Emotions. What's your input? It puts all these things together and says, yeah, this doesn't look like a good thing. So pain is a good way to alert the conscious that this is not a good thing. So the idea of something bad happening because we ignored it, that's absolutely possible. It's possible. We respect pain. We respect it happened. We don't ignore it. We try to change the situation. So, right, if someone is squatting in front of you and their knee suddenly hurts, you're not going to say, it's nothing. You want to change that. Move your leg this way, move your leg that way. And what that does, it changes the environment. It changes the inputs. It changes what's happening. And that might be enough. Exercise is a wonderful thing for dealing with pain. As a physical therapist, I can't think of a patient that I've ever had that I didn't give some kind of exercise for. But the assumption of what the exercise is doing, you must be weak, so it's making you stronger, and your pain is from this, you can't handle what you're trying to do, is not necessarily true. Well, all we know is that we're changing inputs. We're changing the individual. We are possibly making them stronger, or we're changing the way that they move. We're changing the environment. We're enriching the nervous system, the information that comes to it. But whatever it is that we're doing with exercise, with touching, with, like massage or manual therapies of some kind, or foam rollers or whatever, and the information that we give them all changes the environment that the individual is experiencing. It can change internally, right? There are things maybe healing, and we're changing, what they believe and think and experience from that healing. Do they think the healing well, that's good, but it just happened again? Or do they think healing is great and I am solid and strong and my back is solid, and even if there's something there, if I don't feel pain, then obviously it's not a big deal, right? Those are two very different ways of looking at things. So no, educate, inform, respect the pain, don't ignore it, but don't be worried that, oh, I might be missing something that's really important. If it's important, your body will tell you, hey, it's important now.
It's interesting because, I mean, like I said in the beginning, I think what really intrigued me about this is this whole idea that this really relates to the art of coaching, and how we talk to people. I even feel like marketing, even, we're the pain relief center, whatever.
Sure.
Even in the way we talk to people, well, you're going to feel better. Obviously, we never want to make promises. We're not going to make people completely bulletproof, but there's a really good chance they're going to feel better. I get a lot of people who right away, and it's funny. I always say I do better in the first 4 or 5 sessions than over time. Like in the beginning, everyone's like, "I feel great," Not that they're not saying that in a year later, but man, this is so great, and you try to reinforce that. There's things we can do to change our environment, and that kind of goes to acting professional, looking professional, and how we're cueing. I know there's, we kind of touched on this a little bit, or you did earlier with some of the biomechanics, or really some of the older coaches, guys with experience, guys that have been doing certain things a certain way. Well, I've been telling people that valgus will create an ACL injury and it'll cause you pain, or this way. What do you have to say to that as well? Because I think maybe you did answer it earlier with, look, it's not always about this, but about what we say to them, but it's certainly a piece of it. Because somebody's going to say, I've been doing this way for 30 years. Coach Boyle might say that, right?
Right.
There's a lot of strength coaches out there, college coaches that have been in their programs forever, and they've seen injuries decrease without even knowing any of this. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a lot of the kind of pushback, if you want to call it pushback, to this sort of information, this area. There's this idea out there now that pain science is this kind of silly nonsense or whatever it is. And a lot of that comes from the experience of the individual as well as the information that they receive. There's lots of information out there, and there's plenty of stuff that will say this is all wrong, that it doesn't take a genius to figure out if I step off a curb and I twist my ankle and my ankle hurts, it's because I twisted my ankle. It's not because of seeing someone twist their ankle when I was 4 years old, right? It just seems like it's so kind of lame, for lack of a better term. Anything that you do, so if I'm, a strength coach listening to this, and I'm going, but I do this kind of injury prevention thing, and I have the data, it suggests that I get better results, keep doing it. Right? It's not, this doesn't take anything away from you. I think what it does, other than possibly just a slight change in how you might coach. And that's psychological, if anything else, right? We know that empowering an individual is productive in any number of realms psychologically. Learned helplessness, the idea of no matter what I do, it's always going to end up bad, is a very bad place to be for anyone. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, sports, athletics, or taking a test. Right? There's a huge amount of this research as well that talks about the idea of empowering an individual. That doesn't mean that the types, we all have those athletes that really rise to challenge. They need to be kind of challenged, not good enough, you can do better, that sort of thing. Keep doing that. The only thing that it's really saying is when you phrase your training and your tutelage, you can phrase it positively to empower the individual standing in front of you, or you can scare them. You can say this is bad, and this bad things will result if you keep doing this. And the wrong person will take that information, and it will prime them for bad stuff to happen. So basically, what I'm saying here is keep doing what you're doing, but phrase it in certain ways so that they can be felt positive about what they're doing. You can even be a little negative. Hey, not good enough, you can do better. When they do better, go awesome. If you have to change their position, change their movement, but do it positively. This will make you stronger. You're going to see, and then congratulate them for the move instead of warning them away from this danger stuff and feeding into that aspect of what ultimately pain is. Because when we talk about injury on a clinical floor, anywhere, what's the first thing? You don't know that there's an injury. You know that there's pain. Then they go back and they do an image, or we do a test, or we do something that tells us this injury, this physical damage has occurred. That's where the pain came from. But it doesn't work that way. And again, just take a look at those MRIs of the elite tennis players. They'd all should be suffering if that were true, but they're not, and they've never suffered. They've never felt it. And there are multitudes of people that have extreme pain, and there is nothing physical to be found in terms of a damage. So it doesn't work that way. And to say that it will happen is only possibly putting them down that road of saying this is a threat, acknowledge it and recognize it. Because the next time they're in that position, that threat, they think it's a threat, so it's going to happen, possibly. So people get this pushback because they think that if they've seen something work and they've based it on just one aspect, biomechanics, right? I do this, I examine people biomechanically and I change the way they move, and they're more resistant to injury. It's not exactly possibly what's happening. We know that you've got a system. That's great. Use that system. We know that you've provided an input. You've changed their activity. You probably changed their strength, their neuromuscular conditioning, their reactivity, all these things. We've changed endorphins and endocrinology and how they respond to activity. They've received coaching from an expert, from someone that they can trust. So when that trusted individual says they're doing good, that empowers them to feel that they are doing good. It changes their understanding of what's happening, their performance, all these things, all good things. What maybe you've made them stronger. Maybe that's more injury resistant. Maybe you've changed some of those factors. All that stuff is good. It's not just the only thing. So separate. What I ask the audience to do right now is to separate what you do from the reasons that you believe you're doing them. Because that's all that this says. All it says is that there's a lot of stuff there. So if you believe you're changing this and that and it's all biomechanics, well, keep doing the stuff you're doing. But don't assume that the only reason that it works is because of what you assumed was happening in the first place, because it may be different. So I like to think a lot about, like, if you remember the physics in the solar system, when they first put forward the idea that the Earth revolved around the sun, they had these alternate models, Tycho Brava or something, I forgot his name, but they had this alternative model that would keep the idea that the Earth was the center of the solar system and the universe. And what they did is they put in all these crazy, wicked, wild loops and twists into the planets to say, it goes retrograde, it goes backwards, then it goes forwards again, to basically line up with what they were seeing in the sky. If you didn't know any better, you'd say, okay, I guess that's what it does, because your assumption is the Earth is the center. What I'm saying is you're still seeing the same stuff. It's just a different reason. It's not because the Earth is the center of the solar system. It turns out it's because the sun is. But you're still seeing the same stuff. So I'm not telling you to deny what you're seeing in the sky. I'm just telling you to change the narrative that you're telling yourself is the reason why you're seeing it. All that stuff still works. Keep it up. But just keep in mind that there's a lot more that you can work with. And there's possibly more reasons as to why it may actually be working. And it allows you to deal with the people that maybe it doesn't work for, because maybe those are individuals where the rest of the stuff has a little bit more influence or a little bit more play. And that's the stuff that you can dive into. So that's empowerment and positive coaching and education. The body heals. You get better. You don't get worse. Be positive. You'll be successful. I'm really sorry you went down with this injury, but we're going to get you back. This type of stuff, and negating possibly what another professional might be saying where they may not be as aware of this type of information, can all be helpful. So there's nothing that negative that I can think of. I mean, there's always the possibility of negative, but there's really not much that you can kind of pinpoint as being negative of telling someone you're going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And to assure them. But there sure is a lot of negative to telling someone, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, right?
Yeah.
That could be very negative. And essentially, that's all that there is. So if you're worried about me taking away this technique or this analysis or whatever, don't be. Use it. If it works for you, use it. Just consider that the reasons might not be complete. They might actually be wrong, and that's okay. It doesn't matter because you're still getting the results. It's just for a different reason, and that's okay. That's great. More learning, right?
Absolutely. Great stuff, Jonathan. This has been really eye-opening. I think this is something that it's been there's been talk about it. I think we're gonna hear more and more and more about it as people start to understand a little bit more. So hopefully you just cleared a lot of stuff up. You certainly did for me. So thanks so much for coming on today. We probably could have been on for another hour, but I really appreciate you coming on and explaining some of this stuff.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 175 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Parr, Aaron McGurr, and the folks over at Perform Better. You can check them out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Don't forget the one-day start in New Jersey on December 5th. Thanks to Coach Boyle, Jonathan Fass for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning, performance enhancement, and pain. Rachel Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Frank Dolan and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Joel Sanders for his insights into the art of coaching with Exos. Check them out at teamexos.com/education. Audible.com is giving Strength Coach Podcast listeners a special offer to download your free audiobook. Today, go to freebookfromant.com. Again, that's freebookfromant.com for your free audiobook. And of course, remember you can join strengthcoach.com and have access to the site for just $1. 3 days, just $1. Once your 3-day trial is over and you become a member, you'll be able to download Coach Boyle's 2 books. And if you have a staff of 2 or more and you want to sign up as a group, we have a special membership offer for you, up to 50% off depending on how many people you got. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name's Anthony Renna. You can reach me at strengthcoachpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.